much know most of the bandsaws that are out there. You can't really buy too many American-made bandsaws. They're all manufactured in Taiwan and China. Some of them are assembled here by Powermatic, Laguna, Jet, and Rikon have assembly plants, but they're actually, the castings are all made in other countries. Those are the top 4 bandsaws that I normally recommend to people, is the Jet, Powermatic, Laguna, and Rikon. There are better bandsaws out there. They cost a lot more. Frank has some Italian ones here that are absolutely unbelievable, but they're a lot more money, depending on what you want to use them for and all that stuff. I'm going to be starting off with the blades. I'm going to show you how to fold them, unfold them. I'm going to talk about teeth, the width, what they're made out of. And then I'm actually going to take this Jet bandsaw that's alongside me, and I'm going to go through it from top to bottom. What I would do if I got a used bandsaw, how I would tune it up, what I would do to run it at its best efficiency. I have a lot of little gadgets that I use to align everything up. The one thing I can't iterate enough is do not use a level on your bandsaw unless you're mounting it to the floor. If you're not mounting it to the floor, the table has nothing to do with being level. The base can be level, but the top plate, this plate here, has nothing to do with being level. It has to do with being square. Cuts, it's got to be square, and I'll show you how to do that in a little while. Right now, I'm going to go over to some drawings that I have on the board, and I'm going to explain about the blades themselves. Can everybody hear me? Is your camera on, Frank?
Yep. Yep, you're good.
Okay. This first diagram that's up here, these are the teeth that are on your general purpose or blades that have a set on them, where one teeth goes to the right, one teeth is in the middle, one tooth is to the left, then it goes back to center, to right, to center, left, and that distance, that blade cut, is called the kerf. The teeth themselves are set at different angles. The more aggressive those teeth are set, the more aggressive the blade is, the dumber it's going to get. The other thing, you'll see me put on the bandsaw here, if you're cutting it,
Charlie, we're losing you at least half the time.
is this any better?
You better put it on. Good, you're. Yeah, it'll come in a minute. Just stick it in there. That's good.
Is that any better? Okay. If you're cutting an arc, your blade is going to hit in 2 spots, where the teeth are and the back corner of the blade. That creates heat. Take a stone and cut off those back corners very slightly, but round them off. It doesn't have to be perfectly round, and that will cut down on the heat on the blade. Heat on the blade ruins the temper of the metal that it's made out of, and you're going to lose the sharpness of your blade quickly. So cut that little piece of squareness on the back of the blade grind it, not grind it off, file it off, or you can sand it off, but get rid of it and the blade will last longer.
Do you do that while the machine is on?
Yes, and I'll do it while I'm over there. There's basically three types of blades. A standard blade, which has the number of teeth regularly there, and it's probably 8 teeth up to 32 teeth. Between 18 and 32 teeth per inch is for plastic and metal. I particularly don't like using my bandsaw on metal because the metal filings get into the tires, but you can cut it. Your ripping are called hook blades. They're normally between 3 and 8 teeth per inch. They have a high hook behind the tooth and it removes a lot of the wood. If you're using green wood, sap will be built up over here on every single hook, and you have to get that off before you do a lot of work. After you're done cutting, you have to take that off, and I'll show you how to do that. If you're ripping, resawing, a skip tooth blade is the best. Skip tooth blades are normally between 2 and 6 teeth per inch. I like 4 teeth per inch. And it doesn't have such high hooks on it, so it doesn't gum up as quickly. But the big important thing about a skip blade, going back to this drawing, it has no set tooth. They're all in a row. The blade is a little thinner, so the kerf is going to be narrower. That's the kind of blade you want for doing resawing. Now that I talked about the types of blades, I'm going to talk about the material. You got carbide, which is normally your standard blade. You've got bimetal, and you've got carbide.
Carbon and carbide, yeah.
Carbon steel, carbide, and carbide tip blades, and then you have bimetal. Bimetal blades are the ones that I use most. They're a little bit more expensive than carbon steel. They last most of the time 3 times longer, but there's a warning with them. Bimetal blades do not like to be twisted. It's not recommended if you're making curves to use bimetal blades. You can, but the blade does not like it. Carbon steel, on the other hand, doesn't mind being bent. Skip blades should not be used for any arcs at all because it's made for ripping long distances. If your blade is too loose, you're going to get a cut like this in your wood. It's going to be an arc. If your blade is not square, if it's out of square towards the post or towards where the blade comes down, you're going to get a cut like this. If your blade is open, you're going to get a cut like this. And I'll show you how to correct that. The next thing is the tension on the blades. You can buy an expensive meter, which will give you a lot of information about the blade stiffness. I normally raise the blade twice, once to 6 inches, and I'm looking for no more than 1/4 inch deflection. And then I raise up to 12 inches, and I don't want more than 3/8, maybe a 1/2 inch, depending on the blade. Blades come in different sizes from 1/8 inch all the way up to 1 inch or larger, depending on your saw. And after doing a lot of experimenting and reading, if your saw will take a 3/4 inch blade, but it can't give enough tension to it, and you're doing resawing, it's better to have a 1/2 inch resaw blade with the right tension on it than it is to have a 3/4 inch blade that you can't possibly get the right tension on it because your saw might not be able to give it that tension. Placement of the tires on your, this is the wheel. Wheels are generally made out of either aluminum, cast aluminum, or cast iron. I like cast iron because I like the weight of the wheels spinning. There's two types of tires. There's an arched oval tire and a flat tire. You want your blade, if it's an arched blade, you want it in the middle of that arch. If it's a flat blade, you can move it up and back a little bit more distance, but I still like being in the center. If your blade is too far forward, you're going to get a convex cut. If it's too far back, you're going to get a concave cut. So having the blade tracking properly is extremely important. And every time you change the blade, you have to retrack it. When you set your rollers or your thrust bearing, you have to redo that for every blade. And you want to make sure that your blade, when you're setting your rollers, are behind the teeth. You don't want them in here because they'll scar the bearings. You want it behind, so that's why you have to reset all your bearings also. The same thing with both of these. You don't want the bearing in this area. You want the bearing in the back. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, there's a couple of references that I use. One of them, show you the book, and I think Scott might even have it up there. There's a reference book if you want to rebuild a bandsaw or even make a bandsaw a little better. There's a book here, Tour Design. Bandsaw accessory catalog. It's in Jacksonville, Florida. And when you order something from them, you'll get the book. Otherwise, it's about an inch thick. But it has accessories and bearings and stuff like that that you normally would not see else. It's a great resource for understanding bandsaws also. Another thing is, if you're here in right in Sarasota, there is a company called Bearing Marketing. It's on Martin Luther King Way. I think we'll put it in the newsletter. If you need bearings for either your wheels or for your thrust bearings, this guy has them all at very good prices. And if you bring cash, he appreciates that. You might save a little bit of money. Now, going to put the microphone on, undo a blade and how to redo it. Is everybody still with me? Scott?
Yes.
Okay. This is going to have to come down a little bit more. Okay, I hope you guys can see this. Hold that for 1 minute, Frank. Without safety goggles, This is a blade. I'm going to take it and I'm going to unwind it. And I keep it away from me. It's going to want to go in every direction. Once you have the blade like this, you put it on your door. The problem is most people can't get it into the power. Turn the blade outside. Teeth are facing away from you. Step on the bottom of the blade with your foot. Step on it. Take one of your hands, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, it don't make a difference. Turn it as much as you can facing outward. You're going to wind up in the same position when you're done. It doesn't take a lot. You take the blade and you twist it until you're back into the... And just make the circles the same size. Teeth are facing the same way. And there you have your blade all in a circle. No twists in it, no bends in it. It's all ready to go back in the box. But make sure you're wearing safety glasses and good gloves. I like leather gloves when doing this. Hold the blade away from you. Your hand is as far out as you can go facing out. And do a 360 turn. And push down. Standing on the bottom of the blade. It's as simple as that. You want to do a 360 turn with your hand. You're going to wind up in the same position that you started. Most blades, like I was saying, 3-inch, 5/8, and 1 inch. If you're using an 1/8-inch blade, do yourself a favor, buy a scroll saw. You don't need 100 inches long when you can use a 6-inch blade on a scroll saw, which costs about $1. Instead of spending 25-inch blade, they don't have a lot of tension. You can easily make a 1/8-inch blade. Get up can take a little bit of tension, but an 1/8-inch takes a lot of tension to break. Okay. That better?
Well, for the moment.
Is that better?
Yeah, that was fine. I don't know if it's motion or what, but you just come and go.
Okay. You want me to repeat that, what I just said? Okay. So, blades come from quarter.
What is it again? All right, Charlie, just aren't hearing you. The volume is there, but it's very scratchy, just bouncing in and out.
Any better now?
That was good.
Okay, blades come 1/8, 3/16, quarter, 3/8, 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/4, and 1 inch. Probably the most useful blades are 3/8, ½ inch, and 3/4 are the most used blades. If you're doing a lot of cutting circles, use a carbon steel blade. If you're doing a lot of ripping or straight cuts, you're making segments or something like that, bimetal blades. I happen to like bimetal blades a lot. They do last a lot longer. They keep their sharpness. A thick blade is more stable, needs more tension, but it doesn't like to be twisted. Thin blades for lighter work, and they tend not to mind being twisted a little. I told you about the teeth per inch. Metal and plastic, you need a lot of teeth per inch. Wood, you need less teeth per inch.
Charlie, let's do an audio check.
Check, 1, 2, 3. Check, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, let's do it again.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
How's everybody? Jim, can you hear this?
Yes. Yeah, that came through. Good.
Okay, let's go this way from,
We're gonna go use this mic?
Yep. And you can take off the other.
Okay.
How long a tether do I have? Okay.
Give me my glasses. When you're cutting, your blade's going to be producing sawdust. The sawdust should be warm, not hot, and not.
That's not working at all, guys. Too far away from the mic, I think.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, when you're cutting, you're going to have sawdust. Sawdust should be warm, not hot, and definitely not smoking. Blades are very susceptible to heat.
Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie. I don't mean to be a pain in the butt here, but we still don't have you. You're just coming and going.
Well, we tried.
On the wireless one, Jim, if they take the plug that's where the headphones go into the little box and just pull it in and out real quick a few times, that'll clean the contacts and it probably won't break up then.
Frank, we're going to go back to that.
Could you hear that, Charlie?
Yes,
Put new batteries in
Down
too.
there.
we're putting new batteries in it.
That might be a factor.
Yeah, I don't know why this shouldn't work.
I know, that should be fine. Hey Jim, this is an audio test. How does it sound to you?
Okay, fresh batteries are in, am I coming
No,
through?
no, I have you turned off. You can go into settings. They'll come up. Go over to audio. Actually, it's on.
You want to try this one again?
Yes, give that a try.
All right, is this any better? Can you hear me better, Jim?
So far, so good.
Okay. I'm going to show you how to clean the blade, and I'm going to show you how I round the back of the blade.
Plug it into 220?
No, that's the machine. It's 110. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Most of the time, and not in this particular case, but most of the time I would have the tension bar pulled back. You do not leave the tension on the blade when not being in use. But I forget sometimes, so I actually have a sign over the start button just taped up here, and it reminds me to re-engage the tension bar before I hit the start button. I don't cover the stop, I just cover the start button with the small piece of paper that's glued up here. Now this is a 14-year-old jet bandsaw that Frank just got. This is the stone that you normally hone your tools on, or you can use a fine file. That's all it takes, but you have to do this for every blade. Next thing I have is a wire brush, a small wire brush. And I just hold it there for a couple of seconds, and that gets the sawdust and the sap and any glue that's on there off. I'm going to turn the door off. Yes, I'm avoiding the teeth. Normally the sap doesn't, and any glue doesn't stick to the tooth. It sticks behind it where the gullet of the relief is. I'm now going to go in the process of tuning up this bandsaw, and I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way all the way up.
You want to try to clip it on your shirt, and then you can use both hands?
Good? Still good? Okay. Carbon blade. Light out of your camera. Okay. These wheels, if you can put the camera in here. Normally there'd be another set of pulleys behind this one and another set of pulleys behind here. It was 2-speed. So I'm going to check and on the belt, and I'm going to feel it if it's dry or if it's cracked. If it's cracked, you need to replace it. If your garage is hot a lot, these bands can dry out, and try to look where the rubber meets the canvas and see if it's separating. If it is, the blade needs to be, the band needs to be replaced. There's one bearing here. Jim? Is that better, Jim?
Oh, just when you said better, I heard that, but
Now.
somehow there's a loose connection and you just crack it out.
No, try push a button in.
Hmm?
That, no, not that. And pull it out.
We back?
We're back.
Okay. This is a cast iron wheel. There's a one bearing in the center here. That's not the only one. There's one on the back also. You need a pair of ring pliers to take off this keeper on the outside to this wheel. Then you make either a piece of wood, aluminum or brass, and you tap out the bearings to get them, to replace them. You'll know when they're making noise. They'll make quite a bit of noise. Don't put WD-40 on them because they're grease inside here. If you put WD-40 on them, it'll loosen the grease and it'll really make a lot of noise. So make sure your belt in good shape. It's got the right tension on it, which there's a tension knob in the back to give more tension on it. The other thing that people do not adjust is the brush. One cleans the belts, this one cleans the brushes. What I do is I take a regular hacksaw blade, and I've already done this one, but I take the hacksaw blade and I run bristles and the wheel, and when I did that to this one, and it's still coming out, there's still dirt coming out. See it?
We lost what the hacksaw blade was.
The hacksaw blade goes between the tire and the bristles, and you bring it through the bristles, and it cleans the bristles out of any debris that's in there. The more debris that's in the bristles, the less it's going to clean. Allen key bolt right here that you can adjust the pressure of those brushes on the wheel. If you feel that it's gritty or sandy, running. That same used to clean, and you just run it back and forth over the tire. Now the tire is going to have marks on it.
Worse than ever now. I just don't know if we need to invest in a new microphone or what. I hate to see you put this much work.
Better?
I heard the better.
Is this any good, Jim?
Now it is.
Okay, hopefully it stays that way. If your tire feels like it has sand or grit on it, has to be cleaned. It's not going to be a perfect smooth surface because some teeth have a set on them. Those sets, when they're spinning on the blade, will make this tire have some indentations in it. Dirt, glue, and sap can build up on this tire. Just take a wire brush and slowly spin the wheel by hand without the power on and clean it. And this one I've already did. I went all the way around. There should be very little noise. Make sure that your dust port, there's 2 dust ports on this, have no big pieces of wood blocking them. If it's not making any noise, this wheel are fine. Brushes, this one cleans the blade, this one cleans the wheel. Pretty much what you need to do for the thing. If your tires are cracked, you need to replace them. The nylon tires last longer than rubber ones. Expensive. Now that I have this opened, I'm going to put the bearings on. No, it's magnetic. Each company has different ways of taking their cover off of the bearings. Another thing is every 2 weeks you should be vacuuming out your bandsaw. Vacuum it first, then if you have a compressor, blow it out. Blow it out first. You'll be sorry, you'll be covered with dust. Okay, this one has 3 bearings on it. 1 on each side and 1 in the back. I've already adjusted them because it's tough to see in the bottom. But when I do the top, you'll see it. But I use a fielder gauge to figure out how far the bearings are from the blade. It's not a lot. It's about 1/6 of an inch. There's a couple screws. This is a nail file. one of my wife's nail files. This is a popsicle stick. Being an electrician, I have plenty of tie wraps. They're all about 1/16 of an inch thick. I'll put that in between the blade and the bearing, and it should be about that distance. I don't want more than 1/8 of an inch difference from one side all the way to the other. These should not be spinning when the blade is turning with no load on it. But soon as the slightest bit of pressure is put on that blade, they should be turning. The back bearing, the thrust bearing, is the one that gets used the most. And we'll see that on the top because I have to adjust the one on the top. I took it and made it out of adjustment. But that one, again, should be a 1/16 away from the back of the blade. And it should be, try to get the bearing in the middle of the back of the blade if you can. Sometimes you can't. These you need an Allen key, which I keep all the Allen keys in the top unit with a magnet. They're Allen keys. Some of them, the new ones, have actually finger screws that you can just untwist with your finger, move the blade, move the roller, and tighten it. Some of them have ceramic guides are very good. If you have an old jet, or you have a rigid, or if you have a delta, it might have something that bearings, they have alignment blocks. They're little square blocks that move in and out. It's normally used on lesser expensive bandsaws. But those blocks create a lot of heat. And I highly recommend you, even jet, like I have a 10-inch jet at home, it has those blocks. What you can do is, where is my clipboard? Where is my clip?
Yeah, this one.
Yes. That is- There's a couple of companies that make them. They make a product called Cool Blocks. Instead of being metal, they're made out of fiber, a fiberglass type of resin. And I know I have a picture of them here somewhere.
The small picture on the screen is in the way of most of the stuff for us to look at.
Here it is. They're not expensive, but your bandsaw will perform much better. They're called Olson Cool Blocks. Is that up there?
That's it.
Okay, Olson Cool Blocks. You could probably get them at Woodcraft. You can type in Olson Cool Block on the computer. I placed the 4 of them on my jet at home, my old jet, and they're between $15 and $30, and believe me, they really keep the. Get rid of those metal fiber ones, the metal ones. They're not good for the blade.
Instead of the bearings.
These are most of the time used on less expensive bandsaws. Your more expensive bandsaws are going to have rollers, and on top of that, which is better than the rollers, is ceramic. Ceramic is excellent. I happen to like the rollers because they're very inexpensive to replace. I don't know what the cost is to replace the ceramics, but the rollers are very inexpensive. And that being said, I'm pretty much set with I'm happy with everything that's on the bottom here. My brushes are clean. My bearings are clean. My bearings are not making noise. The belt is in good shape. There's no dirt in here. I'm done with the bottom.
Charlie, could you just comment, I think you said that usually there are two different pulleys down there that give you different speeds, but I don't understand which speed is best.
One's for metal.
One is for metal and plastics, and one is for wood. Normally you want high speed for metal, and you want low speed for wood.
Okay, thank you.
That's the one, your bandsaw for aluminum.
Phenolic block at the bottom of, underneath there, that the bandsaw blade went through, what was that?
What's that?
The phenolic block, that white block that, I don't have it on my bandsaw, but I just wonder what it's for.
I don't know. I don't know without looking at it. Do you have?
It was in the bottom, and the blade went through it.
All the jets have that,
What?
He's
the
asking about
jet
the brush.
bandsaws have that, but
On the blade.
other bandsaws that I've had have not had it. I don't know if it just stops at a little piece of wood that comes through and directs it over to the upper air suction thing.
You mean this? A block that's in there that stops big pieces and stops debris from. Jet has two dust ports, one right here and one on the bottom. This helps the dust go out the top dust port. That's really all it's doing. It's not rubbing against the blade. Frank actually has something similar to this on his big bandsaw, the big Italian one. Century, what Century? No, Minimax, was it?
Minimax.
Minimax. Let me put the guard back on. Now on the jet bandsaws, most of them, you have to take the door and open it in order to take the bearing guard on and off. There's one screw, and then the door stops anymore. Just make sure that it's not vibrating and it's tight. Pretty much what the bottom is. Now,
Charlie, I've noticed when you're speaking just normally, you have less problems. When
Okay.
you're speaking louder, maybe move the mic back away from your mouth just a little bit.
okay, that. All right, this is a picture of one of the.
Back to the top side there.
Fine.
Are they able to hear you in?
Is that better?
That I can hear.
Okay. I'm going to make believe one of the bearings that by the blade, you can't really see them. What I do when I take these bearings off, I check the race, which, but on the outside, this is against the blade. And a lot of times you'll have sap, glue, residue on here that when it hits the blade, it'll stop spinning. All you do is take the bearings off, and I run it across the face of the bearing, taking off any glue, any sap, any rough spots. I'll take them off with the sheetrock knife. You could use 600 sandpaper if you want. The knife is fine. Do not dip these in clean or WD-40 because, again, grease that's inside here. Now, if the outside plastic ring is cracked, but the bearing is still working, it needs to be replaced. That plastic ring keeps the grease in it, and they're on both sides. You can't put these bearings in either way. And again, this is just being used as a demo. The bearings for the blade are much smaller. So this is actually one for the wheels. Each wheel has 2 bearings, one in the front and one in the back. What? Too much light?
For the camera.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to adjust the squareness of the table. This is where you have to spend some time. This blade has to be perpendicular to this surface in order for you to get a straight cut. When I do a resaw, I take and I mark on the top the cut that I want. Now I have a visual line that I could see if my blade is going off. I do that for every time I cut a piece that I'm going to resaw or that I'm going to rip. And this happens to be Frank's, not mine. The same exact thing at home.
I got a hell of a job.
What?
I got a backup.
You got to back up. Before I do that, there's a plate here. This plate has 3, on a jet, it has 3 edges. You can raise and lower this plate so that it's perfect with the surface. If it's up higher than the face of the table, you're not going to get it square. I make sure that when I put the blade, my square on, that when I run it in, it's not hitting that plate. And I want that blade to be square. And this one is I can check it with a different square and again, it's going to be perfect. Sometimes your squares the screw on the square might be loose. There's another thing to be aware of. It's if the blade is square to the back. And this one is out a touch. So one of 2 things. I didn't track the blade, or the table has to be tilted forward. See that? There's a little blade it has to be tipped forward, or the table has to come down a touch. And the back, fine. The front has to come down a little bit. You can either loosen, I'm not going to do it here now, you can loosen the bolts that hold the table. Either put a very thin shim in there, or a piece of Formica. You look at the space and see how much it has to go. This one it's maybe a 1/3 of an inch. That's the most important thing you can do to your blade, is make sure it's squared this way and squared this way. This table does not have to be level to the floor. It has to be perpendicular to the blade. keep the Allen keys are on a magnet inside the door. When the thrust is about, I'm going to from the blade. That's not good. When I push on this blade, it has a lot of movement. That's going to make a bad cut. After it's set in place, hold the bearing because through, the bearing's going to want. And you don't have to crank up the pressure on the bearings. I have an eighth of, maybe a 16th of an inch play there. If you notice, am I still on?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay.
Just a minute, at least for a question I have, I understand completely why the side of the blade has to be perpendicular to the bed or to the table of the saw. I don't understand why the back of the blade has to be perpendicular. All that, the only difference that would make is that one part of the blade would come through the end of wood sooner than the other one, but it wouldn't change its orientation at all.
Yeah, but what's happening is those teeth are biting before the other teeth. The blade isn't doing what it's supposed to. It's supposed to, all the teeth are supposed to be on the work at one time.
It will be after the first cut.
It will, but it's not cut straight. It's cutting on an angle. It's not cutting straight perpendicular. And that puts more stress on the blade. Now, here, if teeth, the bearing that's right here is in the middle of the blade. It's not near the teeth or the gullet. Because the gullet is going to be throwing this sawdust out. You don't want to block it with the blade, with the roller, the bearing, but you do want that bearing in contact with a good portion of the blade. And like I said, I don't have much deflection between the two rollers here. Everybody up with me on that so far? The other adjustments, which unfortunately store, it's not the, your rip fence here is not a jet very high. It's a Craig aftermarket product. If you want to rip something and you want to make sure that this is perpendicular, there's a couple, measure it, blade, which is what I like to do, but gauges out there. And remember, if you're ripping, most of the time you have a blade that has very little set on the teeth, so it's relatively straight. I use this product that Frank actually got me to like it. Can they see the thing? Carter Products FAST stands for Fence Alignment System Tool. There's 5 bars. If I want to cut if I want to cut a 1/4 of an inch slice, have a magnet on them. The notch is for the teeth, the magnet is for the blade. I put that on the blade like so. And now I can take a ruler or my square or whatever, and I can measure. And from the fence to this edge, if they're the same, which they are, I know that this rip fence is in the same plane as this blade. They're parallel. A lot of times, your rip fence is not aligned. This particular one has adjustments for it. It can adjust it very fine with these two knobs right here. You can make it go in and out. The jet, the way you adjust the jet thing is you have on the jet one, a round post. This is a flat post, but that's a round post. You normally have a bolt and you have a bolt here with a bar that goes across. Behind this bolt, there's a nut before it gets bolted into the table. What you can do is loosen this bolt and nut on either side, depending on which way you have to go. Tighten the nut or loosen it, depending on which way you go. And then tighten it, and you're again with your blade. So you're taking that bar that's here. Let's see if I have some. Make believe this is the bar. If this is the bar, what you're doing is you're taking one end and either moving it out, or you're taking the other end and moving it out to make sure that your rip fence is parallel to your blade. These I find almost make it mistake proof as far as aligning everything up. The next thing that we overlook is the table itself. It should be easy to push your wood on the table. It shouldn't be like you're pushing it against sandpaper. What I normally do on my lathe, I do it on my table saw, I do it on my bandsaw. First thing I do is I get as much dirt off as I can with a paper towel. This is 500 grit. You could use 600, 800. Emery cloth. I'm spraying a couple of the WD-40 on here. I just make circular motions, and I can feel dirt coming off. And Frank, with the camera, can see the dirt coming off. Well, I made your one Powermatic look almost brand new by doing this. Now this is pretty clean. The dirt that I just got off the
2 windows?
That's the first thing I do. The next thing I do, if there's really hard stuff and I can't get it off, here is it. I have a scraper that I've ground down to a knife blade. I'll take that and I'll scrape off any glue. If there's a scratch or a dent, I might take a file to it and flat file it. You can even take your honing stone and run your honing stone over it, make it smooth again. Then the last thing I do, when I do this on all my, when I head back, I specifically do this one thing. As soon as I find it, it's here somewhere. There's a bottle of it. Oh, this is called Flitz metal polish. Again, I'll use an 800, 600, 500, and I'll polish the top of this. This will protect my surface while I'm gone. It won't rust up. And it should give it a nice, clean surface. I think they sell it at Woodcraft, but I buy it at Amazon. And it goes, I mean, it's a little bottle, but I've probably cleaned 10 or 12 machines, and it's not even a quarter of the way. You only use a couple of drops. No, you wipe it off. But it gets in any grooves, it gets any crap that's on the stays. Surface compared to this surface. Difference of night and day. Do that to the whole table. I would, if the regular tool, that also, this particular one is painted, so I'm not rub the paint off of it. That would be what I would do.
And Advanced Auto Parts have this.
Be careful. Some of the Flitz is for different things. Some of it is for different surfaces.
Some for grass.
Yes. Okay. Now I'm going to go to the top. I'm done with everything on the bottom here. I got the bearing. All done. There's no collection in the top. So it's your job to clean the top. Right out. Turn the wheel to see if the bearing is making noise. Again, it's the same bearing that's down there. Same two bearings are here. Spin it. Okay. Up in this corner, you'll see a that tells you that you put on a blade.
Yeah, you release
It's-
every day.
No, that's back here. There's a tension bar that you. It's probably the most worthless thing that they put on saws. But you can reference when you do, when you have only a quarter of an inch action on this blade, and it's not moving all over the place, and 3/8. If you look, I've tensioned this up. Here's the 3/8 mark. I'm way past it. I'm up to. But now I know this blade, I need more pressure than what this gauge says. So I'll know next time I have to put a 1/2 inch of pressure on it. Use the gauge for. I don't gauge as go. I want the blade to have that gauge. What's that?
So we can't hear you hardly at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's put this other thing on. Yeah. We had, this is what they call a level there, and it just clips on. You know, we're not doing well with it. Okay? And it's gonna take and clip this right to here. Now, see how that works.
Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, can you still hear me? Okay. This gauge that's up in the corner, useless as far as the recommendations from the company. The gauge for yourself. 3/8 blade. And it's got the proper tension on it. It only moves less than a quarter of an inch. If this blade has been heated, how long it's, if it's a, Hear- can you hear me now?
Yeah, but even in that, I can hear it's crackling.
Hear me now, or it's still crackling? Okay. I don't use this gauge for the size blade. I use it proper on the blade. Let's get back to the other one. Just that one. Can you hear me now?
Crackles.
Well, I did have. Microphone. Do they?
Same one, same one.
Like I said,
Maybe we need to get a better microphone.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Jim, can you hear me? Hello, Jim. Can you hear me? No, I know what it is.
Talk into that one, Charlie.
is that any better?
No. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Jim, can you hear me?
Can you hear me? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, respond to Scott only here. Can you hear this? This is fine?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Charlie, you try it.
Can you hear me now? Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1,
You
2, 3.
sound more distant, but you're not crackling.
Okay, we're gonna use the other microphone. Hold on.
So you aren't limited to this.
Okay, you got me, Jim?
Yes, we do.
Okay, up in this corner. Frank, I need you. I don't use the gauge to tell me the right tension strength for this blade. I use the blade to tell me where that marker should be. I have the correct tension of 1/4 of an inch, no more than 1/4 of an inch deflection here. It's a 3/8 blade, but if you noticed, I'm way above the 3/8 mark. I'm at 1/2 inch. So I know that this particular blade, and this particular blade alone, every time I put it on there, has to be up to the 1/2 inch mark. It's the same with every blade. They've been heat treated differently. They've been stored. You don't know where they've been used. Even a new blade, you don't know if it's a 64th of an inch shorter than the blade that you just used. So these can be off, but your tension of 1/4 of an inch on a blade should always be correct, unless you want to spend the money and buy a real expensive tension gauge. The 1/4 of an inch deflection, when this is at 6 inches, and when this is at 12 inches, it should be no more than 3/8 to 1/2. That seems to work very well for me.
Charlie, when you're talking about the 6 inches and 12 inches, I assume you're talking about the level of the guides above the level of the table?
Yes, the rollers above and below the table. And I've cleaned this all out. The other thing is, on this one, you make sure that you've cleaned the top tire, just like you did the bottom. You make sure the blade is in the middle of these are flat tires, so they can go in the middle. If you're too far forward on a blade, it's going to cut in when it grabs the wood. If the blade is too far towards the back and you cut in, the blade's going to want to pull out of the wood. So tracking is very important as far as keeping that blade straight. So we want to keep the blade straight on this, perpendicular here, perpendicular here.
Charlie, do you have to worry about the wheels themselves being balanced?
They've all been balanced when they were made. You don't have to put any weights on them. They should all have been balanced. But like I said, I don't like aluminum wheels. Aluminum wheels can bend if you have too much tension on the blade, like on a 1-inch blade. Cast iron will not. I've never heard of a cast iron blade coming out of round. Having said all that, Remember to take the tension off the blade when it's not being used, because it'll stretch the blade a little bit and you're going to have to add tension to it. I put a sign over the start button. When I detension, I just have a sign that I flip up and flip down. So to remind me not to turn the saw on when the blade has no tension on it, because that could do damage to your wheels. It could do damage to your bearings. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So putting a little sign over here before you hit the start button is a pretty smart thing to do. I'm going to just check my list to make sure I covered everything. Hold on. Here, Alan, hold that.
Sound check before we go home.
Some of the manufacturers of decent blades, pretty good blades, are Timberwolf, Olson, Lennox, Sturat. Those are probably some of the most common. When you're setting up your saw to do any kind of cut, it's always good to do a test cut first. Don't use it on the piece that you're going to use right away. Do a test cut. If you're using a miter gauge to cut things, I particularly don't like to use the angles that are written on the miter gauge. Go to Harbor Freight or go to, I actually bought this one in Walmart. It's a digital angle gauge. When I put it on, it'll be at 0. And it'll give me every angle I want exactly. I'll line this up if I want to make a 30-degree cut, or if I want to make a 45, I'll use this to set my miter gauge. I don't trust the miter gauge numbers. Because when you're turning, two pieces have to be identical, the same angle, means a lot. And let's see what else we have here. Some of the bandsaws, and this is one of the things that I, even though I have a Rikon, one of the things that I do not like about it is that the dust port doesn't work efficiently enough. It only has a bottom one. This one has 2 dust ports on it. The Laguna has a very nice setup. The thing that I like about a Laguna is it has a brake to stop the wheel from turning. Most of your bandsaws, 16 inches and smaller, do not have a brake. I like stopping that wheel and not letting it turn for a minute afterwards. You have to remember that most bandsaws, that blade is still moving when you turn it off. I like to keep my bandsaw unplugged when I'm not using it and the tension off the blade. I have a selection of blades. Every time you change the blade, you're going to wind up resetting your bearings on the top and the bottom. You're going to reset the tension. That's the way that it is. One blade is not used for every particular type of instance. If you're turning curves, it should be a thin blade, not thick. It should be I like cutting circles with a 1/4-inch blade. It takes a lot of punishment. I don't like 1/8-inch blades. They snap real quick. And for It's better to have, if your saw is the largest blade that it can take is 3/4 of an inches wide, but you can't put enough tension on it because of the way the tension mechanism works. It's better to have a 1/2 inch or 5/8 resaw blade and have that with more tension like it's supposed to have than trying to cut with a bigger blade and not having the proper tension on it. Blade selection is really important. And I do like bimetal blades the most because they'll handle more abuse unless you're twisting them. If you're twisting them, you're going to ruin them. So that's pretty much what I have to say about bandsaws from top to bottom. I mean, you've seen what I went through all the way from the bottom bearings, the belts, the brushes, the bottom bearings, the thrust bearings. Now, I gave you that information about Itura. Doesn't mean just because your saw comes with certain bearings that there aren't better bearing mechanisms out there. There's some bearings that Carter makes that track the blade. They help the blade stay on track. And they can be adapted to almost any saw. If you had the catalog in front of you, you'd understand what I'm saying. But there's little things that they sell for each manufacturer where you take out the old bearing and you put in a new piece and a new bearing that actually helps track the blade. Again, I'm talking about the thrust bearing in the back. They're very good. But you have to adjust them for every time you change the blade. And changing the blade doesn't take a long time. If you have all your tools, your Allen keys up here, you don't have to go searching for them. Clean your blades, take the back of the blade, round it off as much as you can, and your bandsaw will give you years of service. This one is 2014, and it cuts like it's brand new. So, is there any questions out there, guys? Or you're all asleep?
Hey, Charlie,
Yeah.
I've got a question. Do you recommend the use of riser blocks?
Of what?
Riser blocks.
Riser
blocks.
Oh, riser blocks. Yeah, it's a cheap way of getting a bigger bandsaw, but what happens is you lose some of the tension that you can put on a blade because you've now added a piece to it, and you have a little bit more mechanical advantage on that tension bar. If the metal on the left-hand side, looking at the blade, the teeth on the blade, if the metal that holds the post up is steel instead of cast iron, it might bend if you add too much tension to like a 3/4 or a 1-inch blade. You don't have to worry about a 1/2-inch blade or something like that. But if you go to a 1-inch blade or 3/4-inch blade, you can bend the top unit. I've heard that happening. I've never heard it happen to cast iron machines, but most of the machines today that I see are steel, not cast iron.
Thanks.
Good job, Charlie.
But you're cutting round blanks. What size blade and the number of teeth are you recommending?
If you're cutting for like segment bowls,
No,
No, round blanks.
from wetwood.
oh, from wetwood. Well, if I would use a hook blade because there's going to be a lot of wet stuff coming around. I would probably want anywhere from 4 to 6 teeth per inch. And again, I would probably want a bimetal blade because when I'm cutting rough wood, I'm not twisting it. I'm making straight cuts.
Charlie, he's talking about round cuts.
Oh, you're talking about making a round cut on how big of a piece of wood? How thick?
I don't know, 4 inches or so. I think mine is a maximum 6 inches, but
I would probably use a 1/2-inch blade or a 3/8 blade, and again, I would use 4 to 6 teeth per inch, and just go slow. Ground the back of that blade and go slow. Unless you're making real tight radius. If you're making tight radiuses, that's, but if you're cutting like an 8-inch bowl, a 6-inch bowl, that's fine. But if you're going to be making a 4-inch bowl, no, you use a scroll saw.